Hello and welcome to the second podcast covering Objective 2 for day 25, and this will begin chapter 23. It only covers a couple pages in chapter 23 here. So there are a few things we need to cover here, and the first is this idea of population being the smallest unit of evolutions, and do individuals evolve? One of the bigger misconceptions when we're studying evolution is that, so let's just call it a misconception. The misconception is that individuals evolve. And this is just not true. Individuals do not evolve. So let's just cross that out. What we say is that populations and what do we mean by that? Well, let's draw a landmass here. And we can draw it similar to what we had on a previous picture not so long ago, where we have various species. This is one population, one species, but a high degree of variation within this population. And so these individuals within this population are all living fine. There's no natural selection placed on them. But every now and then, what could happen is so again, we have this population with a varying degree of phenotypes. And for various reasons, one of these individuals, one of these variants here, gains a selective advantage. And let's say it's our blue ones here. We can go back to our idea that there's some predator over here that is introduced to the area, and for whatever reason, this predator doesn't get the blue ones. Maybe the blue ones don't taste as good. Maybe the blue ones are fast and can run away. Who knows? We don't know. Let's say they don't taste good. That's always fun. So the blue ones don't taste so good. And as a result, this predator eats as much as it can of the other ones, but pretty much stays away from the blue ones. Maybe they're really bitter tasting. Now what happens is, what we say anyhow, is these blue ones, all of these blue ones, we say on that individual, natural selection acts on the, in this case, blue organisms. These blue organisms have some kind of advantage, and so they survive. And because they survive, they begin to reproduce more. They reproduce faster than the green ones, the red ones, and the black ones, because they're not being eaten as fast. So over time, as we said on the previous one, so we're repeating some things here, the blue ones dominate the population now. So let me say this again. Natural selection acts on the individual, but the impact of evolution is observed in the population. Natural selection selects this individual, all the blue individuals, because they're not eaten by the predator. The result, evolution that is seen in the population, where the whole population now has more blue individuals. And the reason we say this, well, another way we can look at it anyhow, is this blue individual here, whatever allows it to be blue or allows it to have an advantage, let's say it has the genes little a, little a. Okay, let's say that's its genotype, little a, little a. This blue individual always had those genes. Those genes didn't magically appear in these individuals because this predator arose. That blue individual always had those genes. And now nature, in the form of this predator, selected for it because this predator ate everything else that had a different set of genes. This is a pretty important concept, that this genotype, which gave this blue organism its advantage, its competitive advantage, it always had this genotype. It just wasn't advantageous until this guy came along. And now the blue organisms, with their genotype, has a competitive advantage. And now they can pass this genotype, these alleles, onto their progeny more effectively than the black ones or the red ones or the green ones, who have a different allele pair. Over time, the population evolves. Natural selection acts on the individual. Evolution is observed in the population. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and erase this. And we want to compare macroevolution versus microevolution. And we're going to spend more time on the micro side of it for this particular part of the objective. But let's talk about macroevolution. Macroevolution talks about changes, evolutionary changes at the level above species. Your book gives two good examples here. This might be seen, again, above the species levels. Maybe there is a mass extinction. This would be a good example. Mass extinction. That affects the number of species on the Earth. It's above the species level. On the other end of it, another example of macroevolution is speciation itself, where we introduce new species into the population or into the world. So these are examples. Microevolution is evolution observed at the smallest level. And this would include changes in allele frequency. Just like we saw in the last picture there, the allele frequencies changed because the blue individual was selected for. So now the allele frequency in that population was now more predominantly little a. That would have been an example of microevolution. There are 4 areas where we see microevolution, 4 examples of microevolution. And I want to get a fresh board here, so let's erase this and talk about these 4 examples. So let's draw one of our famous land masses here, and this time I want to make sure we put in some mountains. These mountains separate these 2 populations. They're the same species, but they're a different population. So how do we change allele frequencies? Well, the first way is by natural selection. I'm going to draw that up here. And this is when we have a differing reproductive success rate, just like we've been talking about with most of our examples. On the last one, we talked about how the blue one had a competitive advantage, so it was able to reproduce more frequently. That is natural selection. The other example, another example, and we'll put it here, is gene flow. And this is, and I'll write this down because we haven't talked about it yet, is transfer of alleles between populations. So usually these two populations remain isolated because of these mountains. But let's say for one reason or another, one of these blue ones get over here. Maybe it finds a way to maneuver the mountains. Maybe these are things that can blow in the air. Maybe they're spores of some sort that can now, maybe every now and then, maybe one might blow over the mountains or through the mountains. Maybe a human picked one of these up and carried it over the mountain and put it over here. For whatever reason, this blue one now is over here. And if this blue one, let's say its alleles are big A, and the red ones over here are little a. By introducing these big A's into this population, we're going to see gene flow. These alleles have now been transferred over here. Little a and little a will probably still remain the predominant allele, but over time, who knows what will happen with big A once it's been placed into this population. We can also have gene flow in the reverse. We could lose some examples over here. So let's say we had, in addition to little a, we also had big B in some of the individuals. And for whatever reason, this one left this population. Maybe it died out, maybe it ran away, who knows. But again, we're affecting the allele frequency because these alleles have been transferred away from this population. Both examples of gene flow and microevolution. Again, these are all examples of microevolution. Another way would be mutation. Your book doesn't specifically mention mutation, but it's an important one to consider because this is how we change an allele. And this can often lead to new genes. Mutating an allele sometimes can have a phenotype, but over time that mutation can actually lead to a new gene. So mutations are a source of generating new alleles, but can also be a source of making new genes as well. The fourth example is genetic drift. This is sort of the opposite of natural selection. In natural selection, nature selects certain allele pairs because of some beneficial phenotype. Genetic drift is an accident or chance event. So this is a change in alleles by chance. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say that these mountains are more than mountains. Let's say they are volcanoes. And what I want to do here is make this a little bit more complex, these blue ones here. Let's put a few more individuals in and say that the alleles for the A allele could be big A. They might be little a, big A, little a. Maybe we have something different like A1 and A1. A1, A2 for this individual. So we have this mixture of genotypes. But there's no natural selection being placed there. There's no competitive advantage for any of these allele pairs. But what happens is, let's take this mountain here. Let's say it's a volcano. And it erupts. And it wipes out all of these individuals. So they're gone. Every allele in this group of individuals in this population are now gone. There was no competitive advantage for these individuals. They just happened to be at the right place at the right time and didn't get captured into the exploding volcano. These individuals were just unlucky. And now their alleles have left the population, of course. So this will change the allele frequency in this population. And then our final example of microevolution. All right, that ends the podcast, the second podcast for day 25. And this covered the very beginning part of chapter 23. If you have any questions, please let us know. We'll see you in class. Bye.